Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Amanda, and I'm coming to you live from the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California, where I am really excited to be talking about this topic today of whales and conservation. It happens to be one of my favorite topics because whales and dolphins are my favorite animals. But if you would like to participate with us and if you have questions, I invite you to contact us at the number that you're going to see on the bottom of your screen right down here. Actually, we might need to do it this way. So go ahead and text us at 562-286-1838. And children, make sure you have your parents' permission to text, as text messaging rates will apply. But if you're watching this at a later time and we discussed some things and you had more questions and you wanted to learn more about the topic, we invite you to email us at live@lb for Long Beach, AOP for Aquarium of Pacific.org, and we will have staff respond to your questions as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So whales, when I talk about a whale, here we have the lower third coming on in. So here's that number you can text. If you didn't have a chance to write it down earlier, it's up on your screen now. But let's talk about whales, because what is a whale? Well, right here behind me, we have a beautiful picture of a whale. And I'd like you to think about some whales that you know of. Because there are two different kinds of whales, and I'm not going to tell you right away what those are. But if you have any ideas, and if you want to participate along with us, go ahead and text in, again with your parents' permission, what are the two categories of whales? Now, I will say when we talk about whales, we're talking about this big group of animals referred to as cetaceans. Cetaceans refers to whales, dolphins, and porpoises. So all of these get grouped very kind of loosely in this term called cetaceans. And a lot of times people will wonder, well, what's the real difference between whales and dolphins? And are dolphins whales, or are whales dolphins, and how does that work? So we'll explore a little bit more of that today. But there are two main groupings of whales. So if you know what those are, go ahead and text us in. Because this one right here, and some of you might know what species this is a humpback whale. So humpback whales are kind of a classic looking whale. It often comes to mind. You might picture in your head a whale that looks a little bit like this. But what are the things that you notice about this whale? Let's talk some of the basic anatomy of whales. So first of all, they have these two big long flippers. And this is something that will identify humpback whales apart from other species, because their two long flippers here, called pectoral flippers, are actually really big compared to like this fin on top of his back. And they tend to be white. So they have these white pectoral flippers. Now, depending on the population of humpback whales you're talking about, some are white on the top, some are just white on the underside of them. But those big white fins right there, pectoral fins. Now, also they have eyes. You can see the eyes of this whale right here, the humpback whale. Now, what's kind of interesting about him is that his eye seems to be like dipped down underneath the markings of where his mouth is. So notice the mouth is right here. So he's kind of got not a whole lot on the top, a little bit more space down here. But then also on the underside of their bodies, some whales have some special grooves. And still wondering if any of you happen to know what are the two main categories of whales. Has anyone figured it out? Because this is in one of the categories. This is a humpback whale. Now, there's another example of a whale. I'll just tell you right now, the sperm whale is the other example. So those are two examples from two different groups of whales. Have you guys figured out what it is? What makes whales different from each other? There's one main difference. But as you're thinking about it, let's go ahead and pull up an example of what it looks like on the underside of this whale, because I think my friend Alicia might have a good picture for us. So if you were to look at this picture without any context, it might be really confusing. You're like, what on earth is this big thing coming out of the water? Well, this is the underside of the whale's mouth. What you're seeing here is kind of like the lips of the whale. It's kind of turned on its side a little bit, and all these grooves, these lines called ventral pleats, or throat grooves. And you may have even drawn one. If you've ever drawn a picture of a whale, or you've seen a cartoon picture of a whale, you may have seen all those lines on the underside of their body. Well, just looking at them here, what do you think they're for? How are having these grooves that look very expandable, how do you think they help the whale? What part of its life is this important for? So I'd still love to hear from you if you have any ideas. But let me tell you that this whale right here, I believe this is probably, you know what, I can't say for sure. Is this a blue whale? I don't know if this is a blue. It looks kind of dark for a blue whale, so I'm thinking maybe a fin, but I'm not totally sure. But this type of whale, if it has these pleats, means that it must have an expandable throat area. So why would a whale want to expand their throat area? Because I can think of some other whales that maybe come to your mind that don't have that big, thick throat area on the underside. They don't have grooves. So there are some whales that have those grooves and some whales that don't, and those are two different categories of whales. If you think of an animal like an orca, that's a different category. This one, you'll notice it does not have those throat grooves on the underside. Now, why is that? Why do they not need as much expandable space down there as that other whale, like the fin whale that we were just looking at? Well, this is what we call a toothed whale. So that's one of our categories of whales, a toothed whale. An orca has teeth. So any whales that have teeth inside their mouths are considered toothed whales. The humpback whale we were looking at earlier, as well as that fin whale we were looking at, are what we call baleen whales. So baleen whales are called that because they have these long strips of baleen inside their mouth. It's kind of like having a big mustache inside of your mouth. And that's kind of what it looks like right here. But instead of being outside like us, it's on the inside. Now, how do they use that? They use that to help them filter out tiny things in the water, whether it be krill or small fish. And here's an example right here of what it looks like when a whale is feeding, one of these baleen whales. So they have these plates. This is a section, if you were to look at the whale swimming, it was swimming right at you and you kind of took a slice to see this big area here. These are all those little bumps, those notches you see would be the baleen ventral or the ventral throat grooves. That are expanding and they're ballooning out so that they can take in a whole bunch of water with all the krill inside of it. And then these would be the baleen plates that are hanging down. Let me show you. I actually have some right here I'm going to bring out. These are actually plates from the mouth of a baleen, of actually a humpback whale. So what you're looking at here is a series of maybe about 10 plates of baleen, and they all hang down inside their mouth. And so as you see me looking, as I'm holding it up like this, it kind of matches. See how it's kind of got this shape that goes down at a little bit of an angle. This would be the part that would be facing the outside of the whale's mouth. Like that picture that we just saw, that like a mustache inside of its mouth, that's what you're seeing right here. And then this side, that inside portion, is right here. This is where all of the krill get stuck. So the whale takes this giant gulp of water with krill and water in it. Here you can see. And it's starting to expand. All those grooves right here are like pleats that are expanding, getting really, really big. And then what they do is they'll close their mouths and they will force all of that water out through their plates of baleen. So this is the part up against their tongue and their water, all that krill is getting pushed right up here. So if you look at this side of the baleen, it's much more, it's creating more of a filter and like a net area. It's almost like the edges of a broom where it can get caught very easily. Whereas this side, it's hard to see in this lighting. Maybe I can bring it over here, or if I tilt it. Okay, let me try tilting it a little bit more. You can kind of see here now we have these like straight edges. Now these wouldn't filter much, but when these edges are straight like this, compared to this allows the water to get through, but this will actually capture the krill. Then the whale can take their big old giant tongue and take that krill, wipe it off the baleen, and swallow it. Now, if you wanted to get a closer view, I'm going to see. We've never really put baleen underneath our camera before, so we're going to see how well this works. But here's a picture of the one plate of baleen. So this would be on the outside of the whale's mouth. This would be rubbing up against the tongue. And these are all those little tiny hairs. And it's actually made out of keratin, which is the same material that your fingernails and your hair are made out of. But what was really interesting when we first got this baleen and we were able to look at it, and this is actually just on loan to us from the government. We don't own this because Whales are protected under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and it's illegal to actually have any part of a marine mammal in your possession. So this is on an educational loan for us. But it has these little tiny pieces of baleen that are kind of thin and grow behind this longer piece right here. This is the part that would be up underneath the whales, up under their gums pretty much. So this is the part up there. And then they have these kind of back little small layers of baleen. So I think it's really interesting to kind of take a closer look at that. And now also keep in mind, this is very dry. When the whale is feeding and it's in the water, this would be very wet. When we first got this baleen and we were cleaning it out, we could take these pieces here and move it almost like it was a phone book, like a really big, thick book, and you could just kind of move the pages. But now it's dry and it doesn't work quite the same way. But anyhow, that is an example of some baleen from a mouth of a whale. So I used to have a hard time understanding how it would work, because I used to think when I was a kid that maybe those lines are what filtered out the food, like the water went through its belly. Obviously, that's not how it works. It's like if you had water in your mouth and you're trying to squeeze it out between your teeth and catch everything inside. That's basically what these baleen whales are doing. So that's one type of whale, a baleen whale. Now then, there's also the toothed whales. They have a very different method of feeding, and they don't need to have these big grooves on the underside of their body. But actually, before we get back to the toothed whales, let me look again. Let me show you a picture of another whale that is feeding, and it's baleen pleats that are kind of expanding. I want you to watch and see how it moves through the water and how it can expand its throat area. So look at this as it's opening its mouth. Wow, do you see how big that expands and balloons out to be? And do you see all those little tiny fish that it was feeding on? So yeah, you may have heard that baleen whales will eat plankton or krill, but they also will eat some smaller fish, just like what you saw in that video there. So those are baleen whales. Now, getting back to the toothed whales, they don't need that space because they're not filtering food out of the water, they're hunting for their food. They're going to get things with their teeth, like orcas here. So orcas will hunt in cooperative groups together to get their food. And I'll show you what an orca tooth looks like. Well, I will show you when I find it again. But an orca tooth is not as, or it's a lot bigger than our teeth, but not as large as the largest of all the toothed whales. Now, keeping in mind these animals rely on those teeth to help them eat, gather their food. My friend Alicia found it for me. Thank you, Alicia. So this right here is an orca tooth. So it's a pretty big tooth, but not as big as another tooth that I have from the largest of all the toothed whale species. This one is from a sperm whale. So an orca tooth versus a sperm whale. I don't believe we have any pictures of a sperm whale, but a sperm whale is a whale that has a big head and a very, very long and skinny lower jaw, and their teeth just grow from their lower jaw. They actually don't have any teeth on the top. So it's kind of interesting. But the largest of all the toothed whales, the sperm whale, only grows to be about 59 feet, so about 60 feet long, which is really big, of course. But the largest of all the baleen whales can be 100 feet, the blue whale. You probably know that already. So baleen whales tend to be larger than the toothed whales. They have baleen inside their mouth versus teeth to help them eat. And then there's also another difference that has to do with what's on their head and how they breathe. You probably know that the way that whales breathe is through a blowhole. Well, the blowhole on a toothed whale is different than the blowhole on a baleen whale. Maybe I should say the blowholes on a baleen whale. So a baleen whale like this one, they actually have two holes for breathing. They have what we call a double blowhole. So it looks like they have gigantic nostrils on top of their heads. And here's a great picture of one of our local whales, a gray whale, that you can see two openings right here when they're breathing, whereas the toothed whales just have one. And what's interesting is that they can actually close those blowholes off. So when they go diving, they're not getting water going up their nose. Like when we have to go diving and we hold our nose, whales don't have to do that. They can close their blowholes so that they don't get water inside. Now, this is the blowhole of probably the most common and most familiar of all the cetaceans. This is a bottlenose dolphin. So a bottlenose dolphin, what would that be? A toothed whale or a baleen whale? Yes, exactly. It's a toothed whale. So you might say, but wait, I thought they were whales or they were dolphins. What's the difference? A lot of times whales will refer to the size of, we think of the larger ones being whales and the smaller ones being dolphins. But again, they have teeth. So that's why they're considered toothed whales. They're part of the Odontocetes family. And they don't have baleen inside their mouth. They have a single blowhole on top of their head. But they are probably the most familiar dolphin that we often think of. Okay, there are a couple questions coming in. Gage is asking, do orcas eat walruses? Oh, that's a good question. So orcas, being toothed whales, are really great predators, but not all orcas eat the same things. But yes, Gage, orcas have been known to prey on walruses, but some have been only some orcas, depending on the type of group that they belong in, because there's different sort of populations of orcas. We have some that are called residents that live in a certain area year-round. We have some that are called transients that will travel longer distances and kind of roam apart. We have offshores. So there are these different populations of orcas, and they all kind of have their own personalities and their way of living. However, the transient orcas are ones that will prey on mammals like a walrus, seals, sea lions, dolphins, even other whales. Whereas other orcas, like residents, will feed only on fish. So it depends on the type of orca and what family it belongs to. But orcas have been known, apparently, to prey on walruses. And then Lucas wants to know, what is the largest baleen whale? Well, the largest baleen whale is the blue whale. And we have some beautiful pictures of blue whales here because it's one of the ways that the aquarium is involved in conservation and learning more about whales and what we can do to help. We have whale watch trips that go out on a daily basis that we send naturalists out on to tell people about the whales, but we also have people called photo ID interns. And what these interns do is they go on board every boat with a camera and they take pictures of the whales. And they get pictures like the one that you see right here. This is a photo of a blue whale. Now, the reason they're getting all these pictures is not just because it's fun to take pictures of them and look at them at home, but we look at them here at the aquarium because we are identifying which whales are which. And not what type of species we're looking at, but what individual animal it is. And the way they do this is by looking for pictures with this part right here. This is the dorsal fin. Notice the dorsal fin on a blue whale is pretty small compared to an orca that has a very, very tall dorsal fin on its back. But blue whales also have this special modeling all over their back. So these special little marks that you see right here. And so what they do is our photo ID interns will take a picture of a whale and then they'll bring it back to the computer and compare it to other pictures that have been taken of maybe that same whale or other whales. And so they look at them side by side and they try to determine, is this the same whale or is this a different whale? And so notice that this one, let's see, this was a totally different date. This was back in 2013. This one was in 2011. And they were looking at this to try to figure out if it was the same whale. Now, what do you guys think? Well, it might be hard at first to try to figure out, but if you look at this little area right there and compare it to this little area right here, they actually have the same markings. Do you see that this one little darker dot here? And then do you see how this little area is a little bit like that? It's got a lighter area surrounded by a darker area. Well, you also see this one has that little white spot right there, and you have that white spot right there. Well, initially you might not have seen them looking very similar, but if you do look for a few markings, you can actually identify that as an individual whale. It's kind of like our fingerprints and looking for fingerprints because no two people have the same fingerprints. Well, blue whales are the same way. Now, sometimes it's hard because of the angle that you're at, because if we looked at that last picture, one looked a lot lighter, one looked darker, one was looked like it was a little bit more stretched out than the other one. So every picture we get isn't going to be the exact same angle and the exact same lighting, but those spots will not change. And so we can look at that very carefully and compare it to other whales that we've seen. Now, if you look at this particular one, what I really like, this one I think is really easy to identify because I look at those two things. And that to me looks like the number 93. It looks like, oh, there's a 93 on this whale. Oh, there's a 93 on this whale. This is actually the same one. But you have to look for more than just a couple markings that are the same. So you can also see these areas here. And if you look carefully, you'll see that they're all the same spot. So again, this one was seen in 2012. This one was seen in 2011. So once we identify a whale as being the same, and we're keeping track of when we see it and what other whales it's being seen with. Does it have a calf with it? Is it by itself? Is it with other ones? How many other whales is it around? How often do we see it? We can learn a lot more about these whales, where they're going, what their population size is. And so it's always good news when we see one with a calf because we know that, oh, their population must be increasing. But I love looking at these pictures. So again, this is the blue whale. You can see all these really beautiful modeling marks that they have on their body. And so the aquarium, with the research that we've been doing with Cascadia Research Collective and taking pictures and identifying all of these whales, we have actually been a part of allowing shipping lanes to change. Because in our area, we have the Long Beach and Los Angeles ports that are a very large, very, very busy place where lots of shipping boats are coming in from all over the world. And what we noticed is that once we started tracking these, that, wow, these shipping lanes where the boats were going were also very common areas that these whales were traveling. And so with the data that we collected, we were able to show GPS coordinates of where these whales were located, where they were seen, and they were able to shift the shipping lanes over just a little bit so that it could eliminate whale strikes. So when a boat is going, they can't really slow down if they see a whale in front of them. And so, unfortunately, some whales get struck by ships. And so by moving the shipping lanes, that was able to give the whales a nice, clear pathway to follow. And it's really neat to be a part of something exciting like that here at the Aquarium of the Pacific. But these are blue whales, and these are whales that come here in the summer months. We don't see them year-round typically. They are a migrating type of whale. Another popular migrating whale we see in Southern California is the gray whale. And the gray whale doesn't look quite like this one. So the blue whale has the blue coloring. The gray whale, as you might expect, has the gray coloring. And this is a great picture of the gray whale. You can see they do have some markings on their bodies, but a lot of these markings, these modelings, are not just color pigments or lack thereof, but rather they can be scars from barnacles that have been living on them. So barnacles are these little crustaceans that grow up. They basically cement their head to the whale's body, and then they have this hard shell that grows around them, and then they stick these little like feet type things out of the water and grab plankton from the water. Well, they found by living on a whale, they get a nice free ride all the way up and down along our coast. Because gray whales spend, and here's a picture, you can actually see some of these animals right here. Some of those kind of yellowish marks right there, those are the barnacles that are living on them. And then there's also in between them these little orange things, and those are a little bit different. Those are whale lice. But they do an important job too of helping bite off the dead skin and around the barnacles, and so the barnacles aren't slowing down the whale, and they'll actually fall off. But when that barnacle falls off, it leaves that white scar behind. It looks like a little circle scar. So if you see a whale with lots of little circle scars, that may have been places where the barnacles were living. But this one has a lot of barnacles and whale lice on its body. So the yellow are the barnacles, and the orange, that sort of pinkish color, are the whale lice. Isn't that a nice thought? But again, you can see these are the two blowholes right here, the double blowholes on the baleen whales. Now, what's different about the gray whale compared to the humpback whale is that they don't have a whole big bunch of pleats on the underside of their body. They have just about 5 to 7 ventral grooves or throat grooves. And this is what the baleen from a gray whale looks like. So this is one single piece. Notice it's a much lighter color than the baleen from the humpback whale. But the reason they don't have all these big expandable pleats on the underside of their bodies is because their feeding method is a little bit different. They'll go down to the bottom of the ocean and suck up mud, and they'll create little pits on the bottom of the ocean floor, and then they try to suck in the mud, get all the little tiny amphipod crustaceans living at the bottom of the ocean out of the mud, and then they spit the mud out through their baleen. And I think we have a video of a young gray whale that was seen right here in Long Beach in the harbor that was doing some feeding along its little route down to Mexico. And so here you can see the whale's body just below the surface of the water. Then it comes up and it breathes. And then do you see those plumes coming out of its mouth? All of that mud. So it was taking advantage of a little feast it had along its way, and it was feeding. So you can tell when a gray whale is feeding because you'll see these long plumes of mud coming out from behind them. So I think that's kind of interesting. The other thing they've noticed is that gray whales tend to be like right-sided or left, or like right-handed or left-handed, but we'd say right-finned, I guess. They tend to swim on their right side to suck up their food, and they found that on the inside of their mouth, the baleen is more worn down on the right side than the left side. But that's not true of all gray whales. Some gray whales prefer the left side. So interesting little fact about them. Now, Emily wants to know, where did dolphins get their name? Oh, so getting back to the toothed whales, maybe we can pull up a picture of a dolphin. It says, well, I don't have anything that says what the dolphin, but my friend Stacy here is telling me the word dolphin comes from ancient Greece. So maybe how specific kinds of dolphins are named, like spinner dolphins, that's a totally different story. So spinner dolphins are named because of the spinning acts that they do, the acrobatic acts of when they jump out of the water, they'll spin and spiral. So that would be in a way that the spinner dolphin gets its name. The bottlenose dolphin might get its name because it has this long bottle-like nose right down here. Rhesus dolphins, or Risso's dolphins, are another kind of dolphin species we see off our coast here that are just named after a person. They were named after either the person who discovered them or someone else that person liked, but they're called Rhesus dolphins. So blue whales, gray whales, if you think about whales, sometimes they're named after their actual colors. So we'll show you what common dolphins look like because, these are some that we see right off our coast here. So right up here, looks like those are the bottlenose dolphins that we were looking at earlier. Then we have the orcas. So these are considered the largest of the dolphin family. So remember, they're still odontocetes. They're still toothed whales. They're in the whale category. But when you look at that and you break it down further, dolphins and porpoises are both types of toothed whales. These are considered the largest member of the dolphin family. So yes, they have the name whale in them, killer whale or orca, but they are considered members of the dolphin family. These are the Rhesus dolphins I was talking about earlier, sometimes called Risso's dolphins. And they are really cool. They have kind of a big white head with lots of scarring on them. When they're younger, they're much grayer in color, but they have a really tall dorsal fin right here you can see coming up through the water. Then these, believe it or not, are the common dolphins, and they are most commonly seen in our local waters here. They're very common all around the world, which is why they're called common dolphins. But it's funny because we oftentimes think about this dolphin, right? The one right here as being the bottlenose dolphin. However, this is my favorite dolphin here. This one is the Pacific white-sided dolphin. I think they have beautiful markings on them. Look at that white jaw, the underside right there. And then their dorsal fin here has two different colors on it. It's dark in the front, kind of lighter on the back. But these are really beautiful dolphins. And it's called a Pacific white-sided dolphin because it has a big white patch on the side of its body. So those were some reasons why dolphins get their names. But the actual Greek word would be, it's a fancier description of how they got their names. Julian wants to know what happens if you take off the barnacles from a whale. Well, Julian, it would be really hard for us to take the barnacles off ourselves because they do stick on pretty tight, and plus we can't get that close to a whale anyhow because they are protected under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. And if you look though, these whales right here, they have those whale lice, so they will actually eat off the skin and then the barnacle falls. So the barnacle is probably not going to survive very well if it's not getting that constant flow because they can't really move. Once they land somewhere, as before they start to grow, that's where they're going to be all of their lives. Now, when gray whales are born, they're born in the warm waters down in Mexico, and they believe that's where the little baby barnacles settle. So they get them when they're first born. So gray whales don't have a whole lot of barnacles on them at first, but then as they grow, those little barnacles will grow with them. So kind of an interesting fact about these animals living together. We also have, I mentioned that these gray whales are migrating down along our coast. Right now, they're actually down in Mexico in the warmer waters, getting ready to head back on up to Alaska, which is where they spend their summer feeding all summer long in the really cold and nutrient-rich waters. So here in California, we get two seasons where we see them going south down to Mexico, and we start to see them in December. And then we have this short little span where some of them are down there, some are still coming, but then the first ones that leave the lagoons head on up. Usually those are the moms who are ready to, or the ones who will have a baby next year and they want to get up and get all that fun food, or the males who are ready to get back up and eat too. And then the moms with the new babies will actually stay down in the lagoons a little bit longer so that their babies can feed and get their blubber layer, their layer of fat built up around them to help them to be warm up in the warm or the cooler waters up in Alaska. Okay, so Lucas says, is the vaquita porpoise still endangered? And Lucas, yes, the vaquita porpoise right here, I'm so glad you brought that up, is sadly still endangered. In fact, there are less than 10 of them, or 10 or less, surviving in the world today. Now, the vaquita porpoise, we actually just learned about not too long ago. But in 1997, there were probably, we estimate, around 567 of vaquita living in the water. Now, they only live in a certain area of the world. They're in the Gulf of California. And so if you were to look down in Mexico, there's a peninsula that comes down, the Baja Peninsula. Well, just to the right of that on a map, between the main part of Mexico, is where you would find this Gulf of California. And where at the very top of it, where the Colorado River empties into the Gulf, that's where these vaquita live. Well, unfortunately, they are endangered, and their numbers have started drastically decreasing. In 2008, but that wasn't even that much longer, just 11 years later, that the numbers had gone down to 340, and then down to 59 in 2015. Then 2016, just a year later, there were less than 30. And now in 2020, there are 10 or less vaquita around. Now, efforts were made to try to save this animal. They thought that maybe if we captured some, we could keep it from going extinct, because the reason they were going extinct is because they were getting caught as bycatch in gill nets. Now, bycatch is when you catch an animal in like a fishing net, or in other practices when you're trying to catch other things. So no one was really trying to hunt the vaquita and catch them, but it was happening kind of as an accidental thing while they were fishing for other things. And so the numbers of the vaquita went down because they were caught as bycatch. And so we thought, well, maybe if we can protect them from gill nets, and we can give them a place where they can grow and reproduce without the threat of gill nets around them, or other issues, then maybe we could help them survive. But it turned out that that wasn't going to work for the vaquita. And we're just hoping that getting more word out, making more people aware of them, and more people aware of what we can do to help them. The best thing we've determined is by eating sustainable seafood. So one thing you can do, even though you might think, oh, I don't live close to where the vaquita live at all, but if you choose to eat food when you buy seafood that is sustainably caught, that means it's caught in ways that aren't damaging the environment around them, that aren't damaging the populations of those animals, then they'll still be around for us to do more fishing, and they won't be affecting the other animals around them. So sustainable fishing is really important, and eating sustainable seafood when you buy it is one thing you can do to help not just the vaquita, but all the animals that live in the ocean and in that ecosystem. And we're learning more about how we need to work. It's not just simply banning gill nets. Even though there might be gill net bans, these vaquita are still endangered. And everything that we're doing, we need to look at how it might be affecting the environment around us and the ecosystem, not just right where we live, but also what's going down into the ocean. So thank you for that question. I really appreciate it. But it is time to go, and I hope that you've had a chance to feel like you've learned a little bit more about whales. And I mentioned before also this whale right here, the blue whale. It's a pretty loud whale, and if you've ever wondered what do whales sound like, you can actually go to Voices in the Sea, and hear the sounds of different types of whales and dolphins. And you can hear their sounds, and you can learn a little bit more about them. Here, when the aquarium is open, we have an exhibit where you can even record your own whale sound, and they'll play it back to you, and you can see how well you can make your voice sound like that of the whale that you're listening to. So I encourage you to check that out. You can, I think there's a link to that from our website that she was showing that you can enjoy as a fun activity at home. So I hope you check it out, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks for joining us for another Aquarium Online Academy. Thanks, everyone. Bye.